Senator from New Hampshire.
Thank you, Mr. President. America was horrified 2 years ago as the scandal at the VA unfolded, hearing about veterans dying while they were waiting for care. Meanwhile, VA employees, we found, manipulated appointment wait lists to hide the fact that the VA couldn't get the care to our veterans that they needed in a timely fashion. The denial of earned care is always tragic, but it's inexcusable when the denial is driven by bureaucratic tampering and falsifications. Cooking the books was one bureaucratic offense, but not holding accountable those responsible is an additional bureaucratic failure, and one that continues to haunt our system. These weren't just a few scattered incidents either. The VA Inspector General investigated 73 VA facilities across the country and found problems in 51 of them, ranging from rule violations to outright fraud. These reports demonstrate that inappropriate scheduling practices were systematic at the VA. And here's a map just to show how widespread the wait list rule violations or manipulations have been, and what the Inspector General's office found in terms of how our veterans were treated and how the information, when they called up looking for care, how the information they gave was manipulated to make it seem that the VA was doing much better than it was. And we know literally veterans died waiting for care. Shameful, and we owe it to those who have served this nation to serve them. They earned this, defending us and our freedoms. Unfortunately, one of those 51 cases was the VA Medical Center in my home state of New Hampshire. A New Hampshire newspaper summarizes the Inspector General's report as follows. Staff at the Manchester VA Medical Center manipulated appointment dates and refused to schedule referrals beyond 14 days in some specialty departments, all to make it appear patients were seen quickly, even if they weren't. One report also shows that top officials at the Manchester VA discouraged the use of electronic waiting lists. Another shows extremely long waits at the facility's pain clinic, where one patient waited an average of 7 to 8 months for injection treatments. The report shows a near obsession with keeping numbers down when it comes to the length of time that veterans had to wait for appointments, which is one of the way, by the way, that bonuses for hospital officials were determined. Bonuses were determined on how you performed on the scheduling and showing that you were actually meeting the needs of our veterans on time, and yet we know that they were manipulating wait lists across the country to show that they were in fact serving our veterans when they were not, and manipulating these wait lists. Last week I met with the current Manchester VA Medical Center director to discuss the findings of the Inspector General report, and even though it didn't occur under her leadership, these findings are serious and must be dealt with appropriately. While I was encouraged to hear of the steps the director has taken to address the scheduling misconduct, I will be closely following the medical center's practices and performance, and we cannot let this happen again. Part of not letting it happen again is what brings me to the floor today. It's making sure that we aren't incentivizing misconduct and allowing wrongdoers to get away with it, whether it is the waitlist manipulations or other misconduct. Unfortunately, the waitlist scandal isn't the only recent scandal at the VA. And a common theme in all these scandals is that those committing misconduct are getting bonuses. Yes, bonuses. That's right, those involved in wrongdoing getting checks paid by the American taxpayer. That is unacceptable, and that is why I introduced bipartisan legislation to improve accountability at the Department of Veterans Affairs by requiring the VA Secretary to claw back bonuses paid to VA employees who were involved in serious misconduct or felonies. It would also require the VA to retain a copy of any reprimand or admonishment received by an employee of the department in the permanent record of the employee. You would think that would be common sense, right? To keep that in someone's employment record, but we actually have to pass this bill to do that. Amazingly, the Secretary of the VA doesn't currently have the authority to claw back bonuses, even if, as with the wait list, the perpetrator's misconduct led to a bigger bonus check. This is unacceptable. We cannot reward those who commit fraud and misconduct by doling out taxpayer dollars. A recent report noted that in 2014, the VA paid out $140 million in bonuses. Nearly half of VA employees got bonuses. But most importantly, what we know is that individuals implicated in an array of scandals got bonuses. For example, the director of the Phoenix VA hospital, who was fired for her misconduct, got a $9,000 bonus. Fired, $9,000 bonus. The VA senior managers who improperly leveraged their positions to get hundreds of thousands of dollars in relocation funds to move new facilities, along with a bump in pay, even though that they were committing misrepresentations and fraud, got bonuses. A VA employee who recently pled the Fifth Amendment, a bonus. Executives overseeing the $1 billion over-budget VA medical center construction project in Colorado, bonuses. A doctor implicated in overprescribing opioids at the Toma VA facility called Candyland, where veterans were harmed, bonus. We can't let these bonuses keep going to wrongdoers. It will just continue the erosion of trust for our veterans who have done so much to defend this nation and our freedom, and that's why we need to pass this bill. The VA Secretary must be active in pursuing the disciplinary actions against VA employees guilty of misconduct so they aren't getting bonuses and taking away resources that could go to help our veterans. Without my legislation, the VA Secretary does not have the authority right now to go after a bonus, even if the bonus is given to a wrongdoer, to claw that money back. This bill passed out of committee by voice vote. The records retention provisions in this bill passed out of the House of Representatives by voice vote. Let's put this authority into law so that those who break the law don't get bonuses. That is why I'm standing on the floor today asking for unanimous consent to pass this legislation. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that S627 be called up and passed. I ask that the, excuse me for a second. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of Calendar 240 S627. I further ask that the Ayotte and Brown amendments be agreed to, the committee's reported substitute amendment as amended be agreed to, the bill as amended be read a third time and passed, the title amendment be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered and made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Maryland.
Reserving the right to object. Mr. President, I agree with much of what the senator from New Hampshire has said, and that is our veterans deserve to have the highest quality care at the Veterans Administration. Those employees at the Veterans Administration that have not carried out their responsibilities should be disciplined. And when there's adverse findings, there should be consequences to adverse findings. So I agree with much of what she has said. But let's be mindful that the overwhelming number of federal workers, including those at the Veterans Administration, are hardworking public servants asked to do more with less resources, that have been through freezes, furloughs, government shutdowns, sequestration, you name it. I understand that the Veterans Administration Committee is considering a more comprehensive legislation, as they should. As my colleague from New Hampshire has mentioned, this deals with one aspect of those who have adverse findings in regards to their ability to get bonuses or the reprimand on their record. Here's my problem. If you use a UC, a unanimous consent request, there is no opportunity for amendment, there's no opportunity for debate. And when I finish my comments, I'm going to ask that the senator amend her unanimous consent request to include an amendment that I want to offer. And let me explain what it does. Yes, we want to hold the employee accountable, those who have not carried out their public trust in which there are adverse findings. But there also has to be accountability for the supervisors, for those who should be managing the agency so that you don't have employees doing what they did. Managers need to have tools. They need to be able to manage their employees. They need to be able to determine how their employees are handled if we're going to hold them accountable. And I want to hold the supervisors accountable. So my amendment would allow the supervisor to determine the length of the suspension of bonus that the individual could receive. It could be.
If I'd just ask that members would take the conversation to decide it's picking
I
up.
appreciate the presiding officer. Thank you very much. I thought I was getting agreement from over here. It could be longer than 5 years, which is the bill that the senator from New Hampshire has done. It could be less, but it would be the manager, supervisor, who would determine the length of the suspension of the right to receive the bonus, so that the manager has the tools in order to manage the workforce, and we can hold the supervisor accountable. The second is similar as it relates to the reprimand being retained in the records. Allow the manager to have the discretion as to the length of time. The bill that the senator from New Hampshire is recommending is a 5-year hard period. Doesn't give the manager the ability to use these tools as ways to advance service to our veterans. And the bottom line here is service to our veterans. That's the bottom line, that they get the services that they deserve. So, Mr. President, I would ask that the senator modify her request so that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendars number 240 S275, that in lieu of the committee reported substitute and title amendments, that the Cardin substitute amendment, which is at the desk, be agreed to, that the bill as amended be read a third time and passed, that the Cardin title amendment be agreed to, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate. That would carry out the modifications that I said, giving the manager the ability to impose either a shorter or longer period of time than the gentlelady's amendment.
Does the senator from New Hampshire so modify her proposal?
No, I do not.
Is there objection to the original request?
Objection.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President,
Senator from New Hampshire.
I certainly want to thank the senator from Maryland, but I fully agree. I think there are many hardworking federal employees. And the reason that I have been fighting for this bill in particular is, number one, to make sure that those who commit misconduct are held accountable. Number two, I actually want to make sure that we aren't sending the message to the people that are working hard and doing their jobs when they see someone else working who's committed misconduct and literally manipulated wait lists get a bonus, then that actually demoralizes the good, hardworking employees that are doing their jobs and serving veterans. And so this is about making sure that actually the people who do a good job, we want them to be recognized. But when you give a bonus to someone who has committed misconduct, you demoralize, not only obviously undermine our system, thinking about the veterans who have served our nation with so much courage and done so much for us. Not only do we corrode their trust, but I think we corrode the trust of the workforce that's doing really the great work every day. And I want to thank those who are doing the good work for our behalf, and I've got a chance to meet many of them. I want to address the senators from Maryland's point about giving managers authority. And I would just like to point out the problem we have here is that this is rampant, absolutely rampant. And if you look at what happened with the director of the Phoenix VA, who lost her job, fired for misconduct, where literally wait lists were manipulated and veterans died, well, she got a $9,000 bonus. So who are we going to leave discretion on here when many of the managers, who I know need to manage the facilities, is important, but when it comes to the bonus issue, you know, you literally would be putting, for example, in the Phoenix situation, the individual who gets fired for overseeing all this, in charge of whether and how long other people's bonuses are clawed back. I would also say that this has been rampant, unfortunately, about management, not just the director of Phoenix VA, but the other examples I gave, the VA senior managers who improperly leverage their positions to get hundreds of thousands of dollars in relocation funds. So in other words, misappropriating taxpayer dollars. They got bonuses too, they're managers. You've got executives overseeing the huge cost overrun in the Colorado VA who got bonuses. And here you have many examples where if we put this into the discretion of how long this is going to go in place, instead of putting a logical time period in place, which my bill does, then we're going to keep perpetuating the same situation where the discretion makes it so it doesn't happen. And that worries me because unfortunately we have a pattern here that needs to be addressed. Second, I would just say that as you look at even the ability to retain records, most employers do have a standard record keeping in terms of how long, if you receive a reprimand or admonishment, how long that is retained. And so if we just leave that completely loosey-goosey discretion among managers that we've already established, some of which have been part of this misconduct, then I fear that there really will be no accountability and that these provisions will not have the teeth in them that they should. And let me just say that this bill that we've been working on that did pass out of committee, this is something I've been working on and negotiating for months. So working and taking people's concerns into account. And it does ensure that before any employee is subject to having the bonus clawed back, they do have an opportunity for due process. So that is built into this to challenge the underlying claims made against them. But if we put this all into a discretionary basis, then we're just going to be in the same situation that we are right now and not have the teeth that we need in this such common sense measure. You know, I talked to some of my constituents about this issue, and they can't believe that we actually have to pass a law to say, if you got a bonus and you commit misconduct, and in fact, one of the reasons you got the bonus is because of the misconduct, because you manipulated the wait list, that we actually have to pass a law to say, yep, you can give that money back, and that you shouldn't be receiving a bonus. It's kind of shocking that this isn't just common sense, but right now the VA secretary does not have this authority. Our veterans deserve better. This is plain common sense. And I'm disappointed that the modification that was sought on the floor would weaken this common sense bill. And I'm going to continue to fight for more accountability in our VA. But let's just have some common sense in all of this, that we shouldn't be rewarding our employees who are committing misconduct for the very conduct that they're committing that unfortunately is harming our veterans who have done so much for this nation. And I'm the granddaughter of a World War II veteran, and so my husband's an Iraq veteran, and I've had the privilege in my job of meeting so many of our veterans, both current active duty military and those who have served in conflicts going back to World War II. And there is no greater example of patriotism and what makes our country great than our veterans. And really, if you think about what has happened in our VA and how shameful it is, this is something that we need to make sure we get right once and for all for those who have defended this nation, who really show us what it means to be an American. And so I'm going to continue to fight for such a common sense piece of legislation, but I hope my colleagues would join me in this so that we can make sure that the VA performs its mission, which is to give our veterans the best care that they can receive and that they certainly have earned defending our great nation. Thank you, Mr. President.